When my best friend's dad offered to adopt me, I thought my entire life was about to change for the better. For the first time in years, I finally felt like I was going to have a real family, one where I was safe, wanted, and cared for. At 16, I had spent most of my life bouncing between relatives, foster homes, and shelters after my parents died in a car accident when I was just 5. My childhood was a blur of temporary homes, cold caseworkers, and people who either didn't care or couldn't keep me. School was my only constant, and my best friend Olivia was the only person who made it bearable. Her house always felt like a sanctuary compared to everywhere else I had lived. Her mom was kind, but it was her dad, Mr. Campbell, who seemed to take a special interest in me. He always asked how I was doing, made sure I had enough to eat, and even helped me with homework when Olivia got bored. He would tell me that I deserved better than what the system was giving me, that I was a bright girl with a future worth protecting. Over the years, I started spending more and more time at Olivia's house. Eventually, I was there almost every weekend, sometimes for entire weeks during school breaks. Mr. Campbell would cook us breakfast, drive us to school, and include me in their family activities as if I was one of his own. I began to imagine what it would be like to live there permanently. Then one afternoon during my junior year, Mr. Campbell sat me down while Olivia was out with friends. His voice was gentle, his tone serious. He told me he had spoken with a lawyer and wanted to begin the process to adopt me. He said it broke his heart to see me tossed around from home to home and that he and his wife had grown to see me as part of their family already. My heart raced with hope and relief. No one had ever fought for me like that. I cried, hugging him tightly, thanking him over and over. He told me not to tell Olivia yet, not until everything was official, because he wanted to surprise her. That seemed strange, but I trusted him. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Campbell handled everything. He scheduled meetings with social workers, filed paperwork, and even paid for a private attorney to speed things along. My caseworker, Mrs. Green, was surprised but supportive. She told me how lucky I was to have someone so invested in giving me a permanent home. Everything moved quickly, almost too quickly. But I didn't question it. I was finally going to belong somewhere. A few weeks before the adoption hearing, I stayed over at Olivia's house for the weekend like usual. That night, I woke up thirsty and went downstairs to get water. As I passed Mr. Campbell's office, I heard him on the phone, speaking in a low, intense voice. I paused, not meaning to eavesdrop, but the tone of his voice made me freeze. I heard my name mentioned several times, followed by words like perfect, better than expected, and ready for phase 2. My stomach tightened. His voice didn't sound like the kind, fatherly man I knew. It sounded cold, calculated. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself it was nothing. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it was legal talk or something related to the adoption. But from that night on, something felt wrong. Mr. Campbell started acting differently. He became more attentive, constantly checking in on me, asking personal questions that felt invasive. He wanted to know who I was texting, where I was at all times, and insisted on driving me everywhere even when I protested. At first I told myself it was just part of him being protective, but the way he watched me made my skin crawl. One evening while Olivia was upstairs, Mr. Campbell cornered me in the kitchen. His hand rested on my shoulder a little too long as he spoke softly. He told me how excited he was for the adoption, how he had always wanted a daughter just like me, how he knew I would never leave him once I became his. His words made my stomach twist, and his touch lingered longer than it should have. I smiled nervously, trying to play it off, but every fiber of my being screamed that something was very wrong. I started keeping my distance, avoiding being alone with him whenever I could. I told Olivia I wasn't feeling well more often, spending less time at their house. Olivia noticed, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her what was happening. She adored her father and would never believe me. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I felt trapped, not wanting to ruin the adoption or my friendship. Then one day, everything changed. Mrs. Green called me to her office unexpectedly. She looked serious as she closed the door behind me. "Emily," she said gently, "I need to ask you some difficult questions about Mr. Campbell." My heart stopped. She explained that during a routine background check, some disturbing information had surfaced. He had previously applied to adopt another girl years ago, but the case was abruptly closed after the girl ran away. No formal charges were filed, but there were allegations of inappropriate behavior. My skin went cold. Mrs. Green asked if I had ever felt uncomfortable around him, if he had ever done or said anything that made me uneasy. The words caught in my throat. Tears filled my eyes as I finally nodded, breaking down and telling her everything. The late-night phone call, the invasive questions, the unwanted touches, the way he made me feel like I was being groomed for something I couldn't fully comprehend. Mrs. Green listened carefully, her face calm but stern. She assured me that I was safe, that the adoption process would be halted immediately, and that Mr. Campbell would be investigated further. She promised me that I would never have to see him again. That night I was moved to a temporary safe home while the investigation unfolded. The reality of how close I had come to being trapped in something far darker than I had ever imagined hit me like a wave. I was safe now, but the fear lingered. The days following my removal from Olivia's home were a blur of interviews, legal paperwork, and quiet moments where I tried to process how close I had come to losing control of my life. Investigators from Child Protective Services and law enforcement worked quickly, questioning me in detail about my time with Mr. Campbell. Every memory I shared felt like reopening a wound. I recalled the moments that had seemed harmless at the time but now were tinged with sinister intent. The way he insisted I call him Dad even before the adoption was finalized. How he frequently found reasons to touch my hair or rest his hand on my back. The nights when I caught him standing just outside my room pretending to check on me while Olivia slept soundly across the hall. As I spoke, the detectives nodded quietly, taking notes but never interrupting. Their calm professionalism helped steady me, but inside I felt exposed and vulnerable. I wondered how long this investigation would take and how many other girls might have been targeted before me. Olivia was interviewed too, though I didn't see her during those first weeks. Through the caseworker, I learned that she was devastated, confused, and struggling to accept that her father might not be the man she believed he was. Part of me ached for her, but another part was furious that she had been so blind to his manipulations. As more details surfaced, the full picture of Mr. Campbell's past emerged. Records showed that years earlier, he had fostered another teenage girl under the guise of wanting to adopt. The girl had fled his home after just a few months, filing a complaint that had somehow been quietly dismissed without full investigation. No one in the system had followed up. The case had been closed, allowing him to move forward with no formal record of wrongdoing. Now, with my testimony and the renewed investigation, authorities reopened that old case and discovered several alarming patterns. Mr. Campbell had a history of targeting vulnerable teenage girls with limited family support, offering them stability, only to slowly exert increasing control over their lives. While no physical abuse had been documented, the psychological grooming and inappropriate behavior painted a chilling pattern of predatory intent. Olivia's mother, Mrs. Campbell, was devastated when confronted with the evidence. She filed for divorce almost immediately, fully cooperating with investigators and confirming that she had often been kept in the dark about her husband's more private interactions with the girls he tried to adopt. She admitted that he frequently insisted on handling the adoption processes himself, keeping her involvement minimal. I couldn't help but wonder how she had missed so many red flags. But then I remembered how good predators are at hiding their true nature, even from those closest to them. As the case against him grew stronger, Mr. Campbell was finally arrested on charges of child endangerment, attempted unlawful adoption, and multiple counts of inappropriate conduct with minors. Sitting in the courtroom during the arraignment, I watched him enter in handcuffs, his expression still calm, still wearing that unsettling smile I had seen so many times. His lawyer pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. As the media picked up the story, my name was thankfully kept confidential due to my age, but the headline still haunted me. Trusted community leader arrested, foster father accused of grooming teens. Olivia, meanwhile, struggled to reconcile her love for her father with the horrifying reality of his actions. Eventually, she reached out to me through our caseworkers, requesting a meeting. I hesitated, unsure if I could face her without reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. After several therapy sessions and long talks with my counselor, I finally agreed. We met at a neutral location under supervision. When I saw Olivia again, her face was pale and her eyes red from crying. She sat across from me, wringing her hands nervously. "I am so sorry, Emily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I had no idea." I shook my head slowly. "I know you didn't. He fooled all of us." She burst into tears, apologizing again, blaming herself for not seeing the signs, for not protecting me when I was right beside her all along. I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. "None of this was your fault. He was manipulative. He made sure no one suspected anything." She nodded, wiping her tears, and for the first time, I saw her not as the girl who lived in ignorance, but as another victim of her father's deception. Our friendship was not immediately repaired, but that meeting was the first step toward healing. We both needed time, space, and counseling to process the damage done. My temporary placement shifted once the investigation was fully wrapped. Mrs. Green worked tirelessly to find a stable, permanent home for me that wouldn't trigger memories of my trauma. She introduced me to a woman named Laura, a single professional who had fostered before and specialized in caring for teenagers who had endured complex trauma. From our first meeting, Laura felt different from every adult I had met before. She didn't speak to me like a case file or a project. She spoke to me like a person. She asked about my interests, my hobbies, my dreams for the future. She offered stability without pressure, freedom without abandonment. Moving in with Laura was both terrifying and comforting. The house was quiet but warm, filled with plants, books, and artwork that reflected her kind, thoughtful personality. At first, I kept my guard up, still haunted by the betrayal I had endured. But slowly, Laura earned my trust with her patience and honesty. She made it clear that she was not there to control me, only to support me as I healed and figured out what came next. Therapy remained a cornerstone of my recovery. My counselor, Dr. Peters, helped me unravel the complex layers of manipulation and fear Mr. Campbell had wrapped around me. She guided me through the guilt, the anger, the shame that still clung to me even though I had done nothing wrong. Through our sessions, I began to understand how predators like Mr. Campbell groom not just their direct victims, but everyone around them, creating a web of control that blinds entire families and communities to their true nature. As weeks turned into months, I began to reclaim my life. I focused on school, threw myself into my studies, and rediscovered my love for writing. Pouring my emotions into stories and journals helped me process everything in ways I couldn't always express out loud. Laura encouraged me to explore my passion, even helping me submit some of my short stories to local competitions. I won a small scholarship for one of my pieces, a story loosely inspired by my own experiences, though no one who read it knew how real it truly was. With each passing day, the shadow of Mr. Campbell's manipulation grew weaker, replaced by hope, strength, and the beginnings of a future that finally belonged to me. As my life slowly stabilized under Laura's care, I began to understand what true safety felt like. It was not the kind of false security Mr. Campbell had offered, wrapped in manipulation and hidden agendas. It was real, grounded in trust and respect. Laura never tried to replace my parents or pretend the trauma hadn't happened. She simply stood beside me, offering support without expecting anything in return. For the first time, I had the space to breathe. School became my sanctuary, a place where I could focus on my future rather than the wreckage of my past. I joined clubs, made new friends, and even started volunteering with an organization that helped foster youth navigate the same system that had failed me so many times. The more I shared my experiences with others who had lived through similar pain, the more I felt my own wounds begin to close. Speaking at small group meetings, I watched younger kids light up with hope as they realized they were not alone. I was not just surviving anymore, I was healing. Olivia continued her own path of recovery. We kept in touch, texting occasionally, slowly rebuilding the friendship we once shared. She attended therapy as well, working through the betrayal she had suffered at the hands of her father. We met for coffee sometimes, talking about lighter things, cautiously stepping around the heavier topics until we both felt strong enough to address them directly. One afternoon, several months after Mr. Campbell's conviction, Olivia finally opened up. She confessed how guilty she still felt for not noticing the signs, for letting me be exposed to her father's twisted intentions. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, reassuring her again that none of this was her fault. We were both victims of his manipulation. Over time, our friendship strengthened, rebuilt not on the innocence of childhood, but on a deeper understanding forged through shared pain. Meanwhile, the legal case surrounding Mr. Campbell unfolded further. Investigators uncovered communications that revealed he had been part of an online network where individuals shared methods for grooming and manipulating minors under the guise of legal guardianship and adoption. This revelation shook me to my core. He had not acted alone. There were others like him, hiding behind false acts of charity, exploiting vulnerable children for their own perverse control. The network was dismantled quickly, many of its members arrested and prosecuted. My testimony, along with that of the girl who had fled his home years before me, played a significant role in bringing the entire operation to light. We became key witnesses, our courage shining a spotlight on the dark corners where these predators operated. It was horrifying to know how widespread the problem was, but empowering to be part of dismantling it. My experience ignited a fire inside me that I hadn't expected. I wanted to fight back, not just for myself, but for every child who had been used and discarded by people like Mr. Campbell. I started speaking at larger events, sharing my story with lawmakers, educators, and child welfare advocates. My words carried weight not because I had memorized facts, but because I had lived the nightmare they were trying to prevent. Lawmakers took notice. New policies were drafted to strengthen background checks for prospective adoptive parents, close loopholes in the foster care system, and increase oversight on private adoptions. Each step forward felt like reclaiming another piece of my stolen childhood. My writing flourished alongside my advocacy. I turned my journals into essays, some of which were published in national magazines and websites focused on child welfare reform. The responses were overwhelming. Survivors reached out, sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking up when so many were still too afraid. Their courage inspired me to keep going. Through my public work, I was introduced to a nonprofit organization dedicated to legislative reform and survivor support. They offered me an internship, giving me the chance to work directly with policymakers and legal experts. I threw myself into the work, driven by the knowledge that every change we fought for could prevent another child from enduring what I had. Laura stood by me through it all, encouraging my ambition while gently reminding me to take care of myself. She knew how easy it was for survivors to lose themselves in the fight, burning out under the weight of their own trauma. Dr. Peters, my therapist, helped me balance my growing career with my ongoing healing. We focused on boundaries, on recognizing when to step back, when to rest, and when to celebrate the victories no matter how small. Years passed, and with each one, the distance between me and Mr. Campbell's control grew larger. He remained in prison, denied parole each time his hearings came up, the court recognizing his complete lack of remorse. The network he had once been part of was gone, its members facing long sentences that would keep them from ever harming another child again. On the 5th anniversary of my escape, I was invited to testify before a congressional committee on child protection laws. Standing in that grand room, speaking into the microphones while lawmakers listened intently, I felt both terrified and powerful. I told them my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor determined to prevent others from falling through the cracks I once did. My testimony contributed to the passing of new federal legislation, increasing protections for foster youth, and tightening regulations on adoption practices. The victory was bittersweet. Nothing could undo what I had endured, but knowing my pain was not wasted brought a sense of peace. My writing evolved into a full memoir. Laura helped me secure a publisher, and the book quickly gained attention for its raw honesty and unflinching examination of systemic failure. Interviews followed, but this time, I was in control of the narrative. I spoke not to relive the horror, but to empower others. The memoir became a tool for training social workers, foster parents, and law enforcement. It sparked new conversations about how subtle grooming can go undetected even by well-meaning adults. Olivia wrote the foreword, offering her own perspective on how predators manipulate not just their victims but everyone around them. Our friendship, once broken by betrayal, had grown into something stronger and more honest than ever before. As the years went on, my work expanded beyond what I could have ever imagined when I first ran from Mr. Campbell's house that night. The book opened doors I never thought I would walk through. Universities invited me to guest lecture, advocacy groups partnered with me to train foster parents and social workers, and survivors reached out from all over the country to share their stories. Each email, each message was a reminder of why I had chosen to speak out in the first place. I was no longer just healing. I was building something lasting. Laura's support never wavered. She attended every speaking engagement she could, always sitting near the front, her steady presence a comfort through the waves of emotion that inevitably came with retelling my story. Her home remained my sanctuary, a place of peace where I could recharge when the weight of my work grew too heavy. Therapy remained part of my routine. Dr. Peters helped me navigate the complex emotions that still surfaced from time to time. Survivors often feel guilty for moving forward, for finding happiness after so much pain. We worked through that guilt, through the quiet moments where the shadows of the past tried to creep back in. But those shadows no longer had control over me. I had built a life on my own terms. Olivia continued to be part of that life as well. She pursued a degree in psychology, inspired by her own experiences and determined to help others like us. We spoke often, both personally and professionally, supporting each other in our respective missions. The bond we shared had grown into something deeper than childhood friendship. We understood each other in ways few others could. Eventually, my advocacy brought me into contact with legal reform groups working to overhaul the adoption and foster care systems on a national level. I joined committees, helped draft proposals, and testified before lawmakers about the critical gaps that predators like Mr. Campbell had exploited for years. The more I learned, the more determined I became. I discovered how broken the system truly was, how easy it had been for him to present himself as a savior while hiding his true intentions behind polished paperwork and charming smiles. My voice grew stronger, and with it came real change. Several states adopted new screening processes for prospective foster and adoptive parents. Federal databases were updated to better track dismissed cases like the one from Mr. Campbell's first attempt at adopting years before me. New training modules were implemented for social workers to recognize not just overt abuse but the insidious patterns of grooming that often went unnoticed. These victories were not mine alone. They belonged to every survivor who had spoken out, every advocate who had fought tirelessly to expose the cracks in the system. But standing in the middle of it, I finally felt like I had turned my pain into something powerful. My personal life blossomed as well. With Laura's support, I pursued a degree in law, focusing on child advocacy and protective services reform. Law school challenged me in ways I hadn't anticipated, but my lived experience gave me a perspective few others in my class shared. Every case study, every legal debate felt personal because I had lived the consequences of the system's failures. During my second year, I met someone who would change my life in ways I hadn't dared to hope for. Ethan was a fellow student with a passion for public service law. We connected quickly, bonding over long study sessions, and shared frustrations about the bureaucracy we hoped to one day change. From the beginning, Ethan respected my boundaries, never pushing for details I wasn't ready to share. When I eventually opened up about my past, his response was simple but powerful. "I'm proud of you, not because of what happened, but because of what you've done with it." He never treated me like I was broken. Instead, he stood beside me, encouraging me, challenging me, and supporting me as I continued my work. Our relationship grew steadily, rooted in trust and mutual respect. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by my past. After graduation, we both accepted positions at a nonprofit legal firm specializing in child advocacy. We worked long hours side by side, fighting for kids who were still trapped in systems that failed them far too often. Our work was exhausting but meaningful. Every victory, no matter how small, reminded us why we had chosen this path. As we built our careers, Ethan and I built a life together as well. We married in a quiet ceremony surrounded by the family I had created over the years. Laura walked me down the aisle, her face beaming with pride. Olivia stood beside me as my maid of honor, tears of joy in her eyes. Dr. Peters and other mentors who had guided me through my darkest days sat among the guests, their presence a testament to how far I had come. That day was not just about love. It was about survival, resilience, and the power of found family. Standing there exchanging vows with Ethan, I felt a peace I had once believed was impossible. The shadow of Mr. Campbell and his manipulation no longer loomed over me. He remained in prison, serving a life sentence without parole. Every time a parole hearing came up, the board unanimously denied his requests, citing his complete lack of remorse and the overwhelming evidence of his predatory patterns. I no longer followed the hearings closely. I no longer needed to. His power over me had ended long ago. What mattered now was the life I had built, the people I loved, and the work I continued to do. In time, Ethan and I welcomed our first child. Holding my daughter in my arms for the first time was overwhelming. She represented everything I had fought for, everything I had reclaimed. She would grow up safe, loved, and protected, free from the horrors I had endured. As I rocked her to sleep at night, I often whispered silent promises that she would never experience the kind of pain I had known. She would never be controlled, never be manipulated. She would grow up knowing her worth, her voice, and her freedom. As the years unfolded, my world continued to expand in ways that constantly reminded me how far I had come. My daughter grew quickly, filling our home with laughter, curiosity, and the kind of innocent joy that once seemed foreign to me. Every time she ran into my arms after school or curled up next to me for bedtime stories, I felt the weight of my past lift a little more. Watching her thrive became one of my greatest sources of healing. Ethan proved to be a devoted father, endlessly patient and endlessly kind. Together, we created a home built on honesty and safety, where no secrets lurked beneath the surface, and no one had to fear the people who were supposed to protect them. Laura remained an ever-present figure in our lives, now a proud grandmother figure to my daughter. She babysat regularly, hosted holiday dinners, and offered her unwavering love in quiet, steady ways that meant everything to me. Her home, once my sanctuary, was now simply another part of the family's shared world. Olivia's role in my life grew too. Her work in child psychology blossomed, and she became a respected voice in her field. We often found ourselves speaking at the same conferences, sharing panels where our combined experiences offered unique perspectives on trauma, healing, and systemic failure. Every time we stood together in front of an audience, I felt a sense of awe at how our friendship had endured and evolved, rooted not just in shared history but in a mutual mission to protect others. The advocacy work continued to push me further into the public eye. My book was eventually adapted into training materials for child welfare professionals, and my testimony led to additional reforms across multiple states. Slowly, the cracks in the system were being sealed, one piece at a time. New policies required deeper psychological evaluations for prospective foster and adoptive parents. Social workers received expanded training to recognize the subtle grooming behaviors that had once allowed Mr. Campbell to operate undetected for so long. The legal firm where Ethan and I worked expanded its reach nationally. We took on some of the most difficult cases, representing children who had fallen through the same gaps that had nearly consumed me. Each time we won a case or saw a child safely placed in a loving home, it felt like one more small victory in a war that had once seemed impossible to fight. But it was not always easy. Some nights, after long court battles or harrowing testimonies from children who reminded me too much of myself, I would find myself sitting on our porch, staring out into the night. Ethan often joined me, offering silent support as I processed the weight of it all. He never tried to fix it, never told me to let it go. He simply sat with me, understanding that some pain never fully leaves, but that we can still live fully alongside it. My daughter, growing older, started asking questions about my work. She was too young to fully understand the depth of my history, but I answered her honestly within the limits of what she could handle. I told her that when I was young, there were people who tried to hurt me and people who tried to save me, and that now I helped make sure other kids were safe too. She would listen carefully, her young mind processing the pieces I carefully shared, and then she would hug me tightly as if her love alone could protect me from the shadows of my past. That love, in many ways, did exactly that. Eventually, my work caught the attention of national organizations focused on long-term child protection policy. I was invited to serve on federal advisory boards, working directly with lawmakers to craft sweeping reforms that reached far beyond what I had once imagined possible. Sitting in those rooms, debating laws that would protect generations of children, I often thought of that scared teenager standing in Mrs. Green's office years ago, finally finding the courage to speak the truth about Mr. Campbell. I carried her with me into every meeting, every courtroom, every legislative chamber. Her voice, once silenced by fear, now echoed in places where real power resided. Over time, I received letters from survivors who had read my story or seen me speak. Their words were heartbreaking and hopeful, full of gratitude and quiet strength. Many had lived through similar horrors but had been too afraid to come forward. My story gave them courage, not because I was extraordinary, but because I had simply chosen to speak. That choice, repeated by so many others, slowly chipped away at the silence that predators rely on to thrive. Eventually, I reached a point where I no longer felt defined by what had been done to me. The scars remained, but they no longer dictated my path. I was not the girl Mr. Campbell tried to control. I was not the broken child the system nearly forgot. I was a woman, a mother, a wife, a lawyer, and an advocate who had reclaimed every piece of my stolen life and rebuilt it into something far stronger than I could have once imagined. On the 10th anniversary of my escape, we hosted a small gathering at our home, surrounded by the people who had carried me through my journey. Laura stood beside me, her eyes filled with quiet pride. Olivia and her family arrived early, helping us set up tables and string lights through the trees in our backyard. Ethan grilled, while my daughter and Olivia's children chased each other around the yard, their laughter filling the air with music that felt like healing. As the sun set and the sky turned shades of gold and purple, I stood before my family and friends, raising a glass to toast not the pain of the past, but the resilience that had grown from it. To survival, to love, to found family, and to the future, I said, my voice steady and sure. They raised their glasses in unison, their faces shining with emotion. That night, as the stars appeared one by one, I sat on the porch with Ethan, holding his hand and watching our daughter fall asleep in Laura's lap. For the first time, the silence felt peaceful, not haunted. The fight was not over, but I was no longer fighting to survive. I was living, fully and freely, surrounded by the people who had turned my story from one of fear into one of hope. As the years continued to pass, the life I had built stood firm against the distant echoes of my past. My daughter grew into a confident, compassionate young woman, her resilience shining even though she had never been touched by the darkness I once endured. She thrived in school, pursued her own dreams, and carried herself with a quiet strength that filled me with pride. She knew enough of my story to appreciate how far I had come, But she lived her life free of its weight, exactly as I had always hoped. Ethan's support remained unwavering. Our marriage deepened with time, our shared mission keeping us connected even through the most challenging moments. The work was never easy. Each new case brought fresh heartbreak, new reminders of how broken the system could still be, but also renewed determination to keep fighting. Together, we balanced the emotional toll with the joy of the life we had created, never allowing the darkness to overshadow the light we worked so hard to preserve. Laura grew older, her hair graying and her steps slowing, but her warmth never diminished. She remained the steady heart of our family, her home still a second sanctuary where holidays were celebrated, milestones marked, and ordinary days transformed into precious memories. She often sat on the porch with me in the evenings, reflecting on the years behind us. "I am so proud of you, Emily," she would say softly, her voice filled with emotion. "You took everything meant to break you and turned it into something beautiful." I always squeezed her hand in response, unable to fully express the gratitude I carried for everything she had given me. Olivia's career flourished as well. She became a leading voice in trauma-informed therapy, her work reaching countless survivors who found solace in her expertise and empathy. Our friendship, once nearly shattered by betrayal, had become one of the strongest parts of my life. We spoke often, collaborated professionally, and supported each other as we navigated the complexities of our shared mission. Occasionally, I would still receive updates about Mr. Campbell. He remained incarcerated, his parole consistently denied. Each hearing reaffirmed the severity of his actions, the complete lack of remorse he continued to display, and the irreversible damage he had caused. These updates no longer stirred fear or anger in me. They were simply acknowledgments that justice had been served and that his control over my life had ended long ago. My advocacy work expanded to the national stage. I was invited to participate in federal task forces, consulted on international child protection initiatives, and even spoke at global conferences addressing the dangers of unchecked guardianship and adoption practices. My once small voice had grown into a force that reached beyond my own country, impacting policy and awareness worldwide. Writing remained a cornerstone of my healing and my work. I published additional books, blending personal narrative with policy critique and professional guidance. My writings were used in university courses, law enforcement training, and child welfare education programs. Survivors from around the world reached out, sharing their stories, drawing strength from the path I had walked before them. Each message reminded me of the ripple effect one voice could have. The nonprofit Ethan and I helped build grew into one of the most respected organizations in child advocacy. We trained new generations of lawyers, social workers, and therapists, equipping them to better recognize the subtle signs of grooming and manipulation that had once allowed predators like Mr. Campbell to operate unnoticed. The work never lost its weight, but it never lost its purpose either. One particularly meaningful milestone came when my daughter chose to follow in our footsteps. She pursued a degree in law, inspired not by my trauma, but by my resilience. She often told me that she saw not the pain in my story, but the strength, the fight, and the unwavering determination to protect others. Watching her walk across the stage at her law school graduation, I felt a kind of pride and peace that words could barely capture. As we celebrated that day, surrounded by family and friends who had walked every step of this journey with us, I reflected on the unimaginable distance I had traveled. The scared 16-year-old girl who once stood frozen in Mrs. Green's office was now unrecognizable compared to the woman I had become. The world I had built was not perfect, and the fight against predators and systemic failure was far from over, but I had reclaimed every piece of my stolen life, transforming each shard of pain into a foundation of purpose, love, and protection for those who still needed it. On the 20th anniversary of my escape, we held a quiet celebration in our home. The same backyard where we had once toasted survival now overflowed with laughter, music, and the comforting buzz of conversation among friends, colleagues, and family who had become my true circle of strength. As the sun set and the sky filled with stars, I stood on the porch with Ethan, Laura, Olivia, and my daughter. The weight of everything settled softly on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a cloak of resilience. I raised my glass one more time, my voice steady and full, to hope, to healing, to the strength we find when we refuse to be broken. The glasses clinked in unison, the sound echoing softly beneath the night sky. In that moment, I knew without a doubt that while my past would always be part of me, it would never define me again. I had not just survived, I had lived, and I had built a legacy far stronger than the darkness that once tried to consume me.